This is section 2.4, multiplying and dividing integers. The rules for multiplication of two integers are a little bit easier than the rules for adding and subtracting. And we're going to go through these. I'm going to give a visual explanation of them, and then we'll summarize it in some handwritten, like written rules. If we consider 2 times 3, we know that's 6. 2 times 3 is 6. We can think of this as two groups of 3. So that's one group of 3, two groups of 3, and we'd be at 6. If we think about 2 times -3, that would mean two groups of -3. So we'd start at 0. There's one group of -3, and there's the second group of -3, which gives us a -6. So 2 times -3 we'd be at -6. The next one, -2 times -3 means the opposite of two groups of -3. Two groups of -3 was -6. The opposite of that is +6. So two groups of -3 is here. But if we take the opposite of that, right here, the opposite of that would be +6. If that visual supports you, use it. If not, we're just going to summarize it and you can go straight to this. So when we have a positive times a positive, the answer will always be positive. Positive times a negative, always a negative. Negative times a negative, the answer is positive. I actually summarized all three of these, and just collapse it into two rules. If we're multiplying two numbers and we have the same signs, the answer is positive. If we have opposite signs, the answer is negative. So let's use those rules and think about the following. -7 times -2. It would be helpful if you pause the video and try these on your own and then come back and we'll check together. -7 times -2 would be +14. The signs are the same, so positive. 5 times -2, the signs are opposite, so this is a -10. 3 times 8, 24, they're both positive, same signs, positive. -6 times 4, opposite sign, so the answer is negative, and then 6 times 4, 24. Fill in the missing integer to make this statement true. So still dealing with multiplication, and just a notice that sometimes multiplication shows up as that little X, sometimes it's a dot, sometimes there's nothing between the two numbers. So this is 11 times something equals 99 when there's no addition, subtraction, multiplication, or division sign. By default, it goes to multiplication. Okay, so let's do that second one. 11, or the first one, excuse me. What times -8 is -24? 3 times -8 would be -24. 11 times 9 would be 99. Just double check. Positive times positive is positive. What number times 10 is -50? We'd have to have a 5. And is that going to be positive or negative? Negative, because the only way to get a product of negative is to have signs that are the opposite. And the last one, -4 times what is 36? 4 times 9 is 36. Then we have a negative times a negative would give us positive. These become really important. All right, if we have a whole list of numbers to multiply them, I would recommend just take two at a time. The order doesn't matter, because if, like, you know how if you do 3 times 2, that's the same thing as 2 times 3. So if we switch the order of things, it doesn't matter. But to help make sure you get everything, I would recommend just taking two at a time. So come up with what you think is the easiest way to multiply this string of numbers. There's no wrong way, as long as you're coming up with the correct answer. So pause the video and see what you come up with. Okay, I'm going to show just taking two at a time. So -1 times 2 is -2. -2 times the next one, -3 is +6. times, right here, times that next one is -6 times 5 is -30 times -1 is +30 times 1 is still just 30 times -2 is -60 times that last one, -1, would be +60. Again, there are other ways you could have done this. You could have picked out all the ones and multiplied them together, knowing that that would be 1. You could have multiplied all the negatives together first and then gone back and get the positive. So what I'm showing is just one way. You might have done something different. If you got 60, you're there. There's another example for you to try. Let's see, that would be 9, 3, let's see, -3 times -1, so +3 times -3, so -9, +18. I'm going to come back up here, times a -2, -36 times -5. And I'm going to my calculator on this one. 36 times 5 is a 180. So a +180 times a -1 times a positive. So -180. Okay, based on what we just saw in those two examples, let's generalize something. Notice up on this example, how many negatives were there in the initial problem? So we had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 negatives, and we ended up with a positive answer. And here we had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 negatives, and we ended up with a negative answer, and that there's something there. If the number of negatives is even, we're going to end up with a positive product, positive answer. If the number of negatives is odd, the final product will be negative. The nice thing about rules for dividing two integers is that they're the same rules as we use for multiplying. So if it's a positive divided by a positive, positive, a positive divided by a negative, negative, and a negative divided by a negative is positive. And what I did before in collapsing those into two rules still works. So if we have two numbers, the same signs, the answer is positive. Opposite signs, the answer is negative. Use these rules for division to divide the following. So 15 divided by 3, just a positive divided by a positive, positive. Negative divided by negative is a positive. 12 divided by 4 is 3. That plus sign is not needed, so we would just say that that's 3. -36 divided by 9. A negative divided by a positive is a negative, so different signs are opposite signs, a negative answer. 36 divided by 9 is 4. 16 divided by -8. Opposite sign, so negative answer. 16 divided by 8 is 2. Exponential notation. Exponents are used to express repeated multiplication in shorthand. So if b is any real number, b is called the base, and n is the exponent. So this means b times itself, so b times b times b, however many times n is. So for example, if we had 3 to the 4th, that would mean 3 times itself 4 times. So that exponent, and this should be up in the top right corner, that exponent tells you how many times you're multiplying the base. So b is called the base, n is called the exponent. When the exponent of an exponential expression is 2, we call that being squared, or 9 squared. You've probably heard that before. When the exponent is 3, you might hear that being called cubed. So 5 to the 3rd, or you could say 5 cubed. Okay, in expanded form just means write out what's being multiplied. So 5 to the 2 power or 5 squared means 5 times 5. Negative 7 cubed. Let me just write this again and emphasizing that should be up in the top right corner. Negative 7 cubed means negative 7 times itself 3 times. And let's go in reverse. What would this look like, this expression look like with an exponent? This would be 2 is the base. What is that exponent? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That would be 2 to the 6th. And here we'd have 13 to the 3rd power times 6 to the 2nd power, or 6 squared. So that means 13 times 13 times 13 times 6 times 6. Important that you include this just so we keep the same meaning as what was given over here. These are all connected by multiply. All right, expand it out and then simplify. So this is negative 8 squared. So that means negative 8 times itself. Negative 8 times negative 8. And simplify means go ahead and get the final answer. So that would be a positive 64. That is different from this one. How is that different? Well, this first one had parentheses. The second one has no parentheses. So this works out a little bit differently. So the base on this one is only the 8. That negative just hangs out in front of there. And what's being squared is just the 8. And how does that make a difference in the final answer? Now it's a negative times a positive, opposite signs. So the product is negative. So notice that one of these gives an answer of positive 64. The other one is negative 64 because one has parentheses and one doesn't. They're treated differently. Okay, the next one, negative 2 cubed. What does that mean if we write it out? Negative 2 times negative 2 times negative 2. And you can take 2 of those at a time. So that's positive 4 times a negative 2, so negative 8. The next one, negative 1 to the 4th. Notice there's no parentheses, so that first negative just hangs out in front, and it's just the one that has the exponent with it. So it's 1 times 1 times 1 times 1 with a negative out in front, and that simplifies to negative 1. Okay, you can read through that. There's a summary of your signs. Again, this can collapse into if the signs are the same. Answer is positive. If the signs are opposite, the answer is negative. These are the rules for multiplication and division. These are not the rules for adding and subtracting. So don't try to put them all together and think everything works like this. This is just for multiplying and dividing. And that is your section 2.4. Your next step is to go work the homework in ALEKS for section 2.4. Good luck. Remember that you can text me with any questions.